Live recording's on. Oh, whatever. Edit. Whatever. Okay. Yeah. So we're live. And Ryan, if you can keep an eye out on the comments. Oh, I can see the comments coming in here. Comments already flowing in. Great to hear.
Shout out to Q.
Yeah.
Welcome, Q.
The man, the myth, the legend. Okay. Yeah. So in terms of agenda today, we've got a handful of cool things going on. We're going to be reviewing the editor. We're going to be talking about when when we're going to release it. We also had some naming voting last week. We're going to share those results and share what we've decided so far. And then at the end, Ryan is going to be interviewing Dan just to talk about all things art in terms of what we're doing. So yeah, let's. Oh, here Nico looks like he's ready now. So you can put him back on the stage, Ryan.
It might be worth it. You just mentioned the editor. We're going to review the editor. It might be worth it to like summarize like what even is. Why are we working on an editor for anybody who's not familiar or whatever for our high aspirations?
Yeah, Dan. Why don't you take care of that?
Oh, sure. I mean to volunteer myself, but yeah, sure. Yeah. So yeah, we have been building and in public, we've been putting out some interesting scenarios, and posting some of our progress on Twitter. First we did this guard at the gate sort of scenario, and then we did something a little bit more robust, a vampire scenario that some of you guys have seen videos of, or perhaps even played. But really, those are stepping stones for us. Those are stepping stones to fulfill, a few things. One is to make sure that what we're building, the features of what we're building, is fun, but in a bigger sense, it's also a stepping stone towards what our actual product is. Those games are demos; they aren't our actual product. And so, what is our actual product? Well, we want to have anybody to be able to create these sort of scenarios. We want anybody to create a scenario just like Vampire, but maybe something entirely different. These emergent narrative, interactive fiction type experiences. And so we've been hard at work. You guys probably didn't know, but we built Vampire with our tools that we are now going to start releasing in some limited sense to closed beta testing. And so we were reaching our first milestone there, where you can start tweaking the Vampire, but really we're going to let you make, in the long term, any type of story.
Yeah, thanks for that, Dan. And yeah, without further ado, let's jump in here. So I'm going to share a window. Okay. Yeah. So this is. Let's get started here. So yeah, this is the home screen. It has all the games that have been made so far. So you see here, we have a few of like the featured rooms. These are the two that we've made. And sorry, I'm going to make my phone on airplane mode so I don't get any more buzzes. Okay. Yeah. So these are the two that we've made, and then you can now click on the edit button and then make your own. You can change the name. You can even add new thumbnails. So for example, for me, one thing that I was really interested in messing around with for this is how can I make this Vampire very significantly different from the current game? And so, yeah, I thought that building an educational Vampire game would be very funny and interesting. So let's get started first with like how it works. I think I'll still go to this one.
Actually, it's kind of worth pointing out. We said the word editor. It's actually more than just an editor. What you're seeing is a platform with an editor. So it's not just like a game engine like Unity. I think the question is like, what's your closest approximate to the editor that other people would relate to? So it's not just a Unity game engine sort of experience, but it's also a platform for which you can publish those experiences and share them and have social network type stuff built around it. So that's what you initially saw is like the publishing, and now Andrew's going to show you some of the editing stuff too.
Yeah, and you can even click on any person's name and you can see all the scenes that they've created so far. Which right now, again, for phase 1 here of the MVP, it's only going to be editing the Vampire scenario, but then phase 2, we're going to start allowing you to make your own like rooms, change the room a lot more significantly, change the characters, how they look. So that'll be phase 2, and that'll be a pretty significant step. But yeah, so you can see here, I picked a custom scenario that I made, and you can see here I changed the name. I changed the name to Help My Teacher's a Vampire. And then, you know, the background for this scenario is your teacher said you get an F unless you come to our house for some after school lessons. It seemed a little weird that she'd ask you to come to her house, but you don't really have any other choice. So here you are. And so, you know, here you have her already just hitting me with like math questions. But, you know, maybe let's just take a quick look at this. So she's going to say, you know, what do you have if you subtract, you know, 2 from 6? I'll say, oops, I should write that. Oh my gosh, Mike. Okay. You know, 4. So I'm going to get this one right here. As you can see, okay, perfect, darling. So, but let's jump into how this actually works. So you can see here, if I click on the edit button, I'm going to press pause. Now you can see here, I can, you know, go around, I can click on anything in the room. You know, I can not only, you know, change its appearance like within text and change like the description, but I can even go here, I can move it around, which is going to be cool. And again, right now, the focus isn't as much about editing the room. It's more about editing like the characters and the backstory. And so you can see here in this one, I changed her name to be Miss Vamp because she's my teacher. She's a vampire math teacher. I put that as her appearance. I should probably keep in that she's wearing like the color of the clothes she's wearing, but you know, we'll not worry about that for now. And so for her voice, this is like the first kind of impactful part of the, you know, the editing. And so I'm saying she's going to speak like an elementary school math teacher who's now a vampire. And so you can see that's why she called me like dear or darling. Like that's kind of like very much how you would speak to a child. And then she loves to ask the player addition and subtraction questions with the number between 1 and 20. And the reason why I picked this set of numbers was that my kids are in first grade. And so I have twins, so they're in first grade and they're learning addition and subtraction between numbers 1 and 20. So what I'm going to be doing later is I actually want to like test this with them and see how they react to it. Because the cool thing is that they're not good at typing or spelling, obviously, but if they press the control button, they can just speak directly into it and actually have a conversation with her. And then lastly, for the voice, I said she's very patient with the player and she speaks on like they're small children. Because again, for our game, it's a little edgier, but I was like, I don't want my kids talking to some crazy vampire. So she's much nicer. And again, for right now, the scene's kind of dark and she maybe looks a tiny bit scary. Not really. But in the future, I would obviously change that, you know, once we have those tooling. And then for the description, you know, I just added a little bit more detail, but not a lot. And so, you know, when we test this, you can see here, she's asking kind of basic questions. And the other thing about this is that she's, you know, asking like, 20, she's kind of just asking the same questions over and over again. Like if we play this a little bit longer, and you can see her, Nico, she kind of got mad, even though I got the question right. So now she's trying subtracting. So you can see that she is kind of varying it, but you can see here that like these questions, there's not really any sort of like progression in terms of how easy or difficult they are. So one thing that I thought would be interesting is if we adjust it here, let me go back to the vampire. So if I go to like, if the player gets the question right, make the next question more difficult. Sorry, let me typing and talking. Okay. And then if the player gets the question wrong, make the next question easier. So if I actually start one thing, explain the answer, explain what the correct answer is, and make the next question easier. And I'm going to keep this in the voice. I think it's probably fine. So now let's go here and play again. So I'm going to get this one wrong too.
Yeah, through the magic of the large language models, understanding whatever you give them, no matter which box you put it in, it seems like it works okay, but it would be better in the description.
Okay. Yeah. So you see here though, I got the answer wrong. And so she said, hey, let's try an easier one. So like, what's 2 plus 3? Okay. That's pretty easy. So I'm not gonna get that one wrong. I don't want to embarrass myself too much here. Bravo, sweetheart. Indeed, 2 plus 3 equals 5. Now, can you tell me what 8 subtracts from 15 is? So that's a pretty big jump in difficulty. So I think we could probably do more. But you can see here with just some very basic, changes in the metadata that powers this. She's now doing, like actually changing how the thing works in a pretty material way. So again, this is just the start, but I wanted to really do something that's a lot different. But to go to another one, like I think that the probably the easiest one is going to be doing something like, changing the story to be your story, right? So like we could go in here. And by the way, if anybody else wants to edit, I'm happy to let somebody else share. But like one that I think could be interesting. Again, I think maybe we don't necessarily want to be, streaming a ton of editing, but you could do a scenario where it's like, hey, she's like trying to break up with you, or you're trying to break up with her, like you're dating, and now like they want to break up with you. And again, like that could be a way where you'd be able to, just making these changes materially change the vibe of the scene. I don't know.
And we're in the process of exposing more things for you to change. So right now, Andrew's showing you like basically the backstory, the description of objects, and you can do that of anything. You could change the description of the chair or whatever. You can bake a backstory into an object such as the streaming desk, and then she'll be aware of that. So you can change the context or the premise of the scene essentially through just changing the description of things. But there's actually more things that we're going to be allowing you to change as well that's more substantial. Like for example, under the hood, there's a relationship system where the things that she has true care about specific concepts or ideas or items, and you should be able to define what those relationships are. So one of the reasons why she sometimes likes and sometimes doesn't like when you get an answer wrong or right is because the description has changed, but not the relationship. So we can bake in a relationship to her love of math, and then that will behave even better.
Yeah, and there's more too as well. I mean, you guys noticed Friday. Well, she when he got the answer right, she was still a bit upset. To configure that, we need to reach into the conversational programs and some of the logic that goes into deciding how she reacts, how to the situation, and all those things need to be exposed very intentionally on our part, right? And so that's going to come in the next few weeks, feature by feature. Right now, we're going to be releasing a very, very basic. You can edit the backstory of this existing structured scenario, but you can't change much of the structure, right? But feature by feature, we're going to allow you to make those changes. Like Dan said, the backstory, probably adding and removing things to the scene, obviously changing and editing the characters, and changing how the characters react to what you're saying, and then maybe some win conditions as we go. Like that's our goal.
So we did have a question. Someone wanted to know, Q wanted to know, can bloodlust and relationship eventually be subtractive as well or editable?
Yeah, I mean that's our goal. Is like literally anything that we've done in Vampire, any user will be able to do, and we're racing as fast as we can to be able to give everyone access to that. Some things are a little bit more challenging to expose than others, such as a full scripting layer is one of the biggest topics of discussion internally, and how to properly do that. Do we use Lua? Do we use some visual scripting thing? So we'll get there. But that will absolutely include things like score mechanics or meters or whatever little pieces that you might need for your specific scenario.
Yeah. Any other questions? I'm just trying to, like I said, I don't think you guys watching me edit is very interesting, but if you guys are chatting, then I can just edit.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things that Nico mentioned, it was conversational programs. And this is the thing that actually excites me the most right now is, and I've been using another term, is this idea of letting users script with what I'm calling language gates, where you can basically let the language model assess the state of the world, assess the history of things, the events that have happened up until this point, and give you an assessment that you can then make a decision on. So that's actually how this game was coded right now with the vampire. We're using a language gate where the vampire is asked, or the language model is asked, more like, was the player's comment a convincing argument to let them leave? And the language model can assess that. It gets to decide how convincing you were. And then it goes back to the simulation. And then you could decide, oh, okay, well, if it was convincing and the relationship is over 50%, then we can let them open the door or whatever. And having that as a scripting like primitive is going to be super, super powerful, because it lets you do this really simple if-then sort of style of game design, but with really fuzzy concepts that usually are very difficult to code in a classical sense. And it just opens up all sorts of possibilities. The fact that we just have that one simple language gate that enables you to have all sorts of different types of endings and different ways to win in this scenario is what makes these things so fun.
I think something
Go ahead.
Something I'm looking forward to as well is as a content creator, playing the game is fun by itself. Creating your own scenario is fun by itself. But there's like an additional layer of engagement, because now you can craft these complex, like inner circle stories, right? Where people know the inside jokes live with your audience, and then play it together. So it's super, super cool.
Yeah, for sure. And Q is asking, is scripting or visual customization coming first? That's a very good question. I think
whatever we're done first, maybe.
Yeah, whichever one's done first. I suspect the visual customization is coming in first. And there's different steps to that too. So the first is just changing the scene. So we have a whole bunch of like assets that we've now added to our engine that will let you do all sorts of different types of scenes and not just the vampire scene. And we're adding, the UI to be able to drop and place them and rotate them and stuff like that. We are also actively working on a character editor, which I think is extremely important when you're dealing with a game that's primarily about characters. That one is probably going to come in a little bit later, so after the environment editing. And where the scripting comes in, I don't know. That's more for Nick.
I saw a fun comment about the can we potentially get a way to link it to Twitch or YouTube so that we can chat directly with it? We've done a little bit of research on that. It's something we could talk about offline, but it's definitely an interesting idea.
Yeah, it's definitely something that we're interested in doing. But there's just some work to be done on that. But yeah, I think that would be great if anybody's in the Discord to we can talk about that. And also, because I think it could be cool for streamers to, let their community play directly with it. Sorry to get off topic, but changing the vampire to be you're dating her and you're about to break up and then having her speak like a Southern belle is like too much. I need to. It's just like it's so distracting from like what we're actually trying to do here. I'm gonna get rid of that. So I'm gonna say the vampire is upset that you are trying to. Sorry, you guys keep chatting. Like I said.
The whole streaming thing, I think, is a really exciting idea. It's super exciting because I think this has the potential to be one of the most streamable games in existence, in that I'm not sure if you guys have seen like Twitch plays Pokemon or something like that, where you have audience participation with the game itself. And that totally could work here, where you can have the Twitch comments or the TikTok comments or whatever feeding into what the player says to the vampire or whatever scenario that you're in. And it could be a very interactive way of participating with your audience. It'd just be super cool. So yeah, we are actively looking into that.
Yeah, definitely. I thought it was interesting where, when I went to test this, it was like the first thing she mentioned is that, so another thing about editing, by the way, for people who are watching and want to get access, one thing that you can do is you can write in the backstory. Like you can see here in this armchair, I put like the vampire remembers the time the player spilled wine on the armchair. And she really hates how the stain, was there. that's like an example of you can go into anything in the world and write a little backstory for it, whether it's about the player or any number of the players. And that kind of, again, we think of good story as like good story is good comes from good motivation. So explaining interesting backstories is a way that really helps the language model or helps the agent like understand how to talk intelligently with the player about that backstory.
I reckon your blood could paint quite the picture. I think you have a half script in there. She's still a vampire, I guess, huh? Yeah.
Yeah. I was trying to remove all the backstory. And that's another thing that, we need to put that in the backlog, Nico, is to make sure that there's an empty scene that we can use as one of the templates.
Yeah, an inoffensive basic thing. Remove the stuff with the blood on it. I don't know. Maybe.
Well, yeah, they're just because like I've done this with some of them, but there's like a decent amount of backstory that you have to like delete.
Yeah, we spread the backstory throughout. Like we baked in the whole vampire premise into most of the items in this particular premise. It's also worth pointing out that there's basically two systems working in concert for these games, right? There's foundational simulation like that's more classical. It's utility-based AI, and that works in conjunction with the language model-based AI. And so I can imagine a world right now when you just say, you had a description, she hates the stain on the couch or whatever. That is context that is given to the language model to be able to speak coherently about that backstory, but that doesn't connect directly with the classical simulation where she actually cares about it and her values are changed by that. And I can imagine, a really cool authoring flow where we extract some of the tangible relationships that are embedded in your descriptions that you're typing and automatically bind those to the classical simulation so that those things are always aligned with itself. It would be super cool just to be able to type these things and then magically, it just works.
Yeah. And that's where like, this graph view, maybe like we're messing around with things like this where you could drag.
Actually,
like right now we're only showing players, but you could actually drag a line, like all the items would be here and you could drag lines between them to set those relationships.
Actually, show the castle
right.
scene if you want to show a better graph.
Yeah. This graph. Yeah. Okay. So we also have guard at the gate, which again, like was built a while back, but it actually still runs. It runs in here, obviously. So I'll go to experimental. We're showing all sorts of stuff. I don't know if we want people to know, but anyways, whatever.
Hey, you know what? So there you go. You got the relationships between the guard and I guess the queen and the slime. And if you act on things, those values should change.
You can even play the game in here, right?
There's actually more relationships than this is showing, so I'm kind of surprised by that.
Oh, maybe there's a bug. I mean, this is not shipping software. That's the experimental stuff. So
yeah, this is just the characters. I think that's why, like the way this was coded up was just only showing characters and not.
Oh yeah, not the flower and the
abstract flower. Yeah, but this is a good thing to kind of summarize. This was what we first built, and it's a really good example of why classical simulation is so important to work in conjunction with the language model sim, because that's how emergent things are happening. In particularly this scene, right? We have a scenario. For those of you who haven't seen this yet, we have a scenario where a guard is protecting a gate, and the player wants to get through the gate to talk to the king. And how are you supposed to do that? Andrew said earlier that great stories are well-motivated stories, and that's also what enables emergent things to happen. So the way that we set this up is through relationships. We didn't code the guard to be at that gate because we wanted the story to be that way. Instead, we motivated him to be at that gate through relationships. So how it works.
Sorry to interrupt, but I watered the slime 2 times, and the guard doesn't like the slime, so he just walked up and killed me. I don't know if you guys saw that. And you can see now that these relationship arrows are all going there. So that was actually interesting where, I'm dead now because I did something because the guard hates the slime and I helped the slime. So then the guard got fed up with me.
Yeah, that's a perfect example. But and that's just to finish my thought. The reason why the guard's at the gate is because the king wants the gate closed, and he only wants it opened for people who he favors. And the guard, because he likes the king, not because of any other reason, he likes the king, and so he figures the happier the king is, the happier he himself is, and so he will emergently operate the gate to satisfy the king. And the more layers of indirection that you have like that, where you motivate chains of reasoning, the more interesting of scenarios you can build. So that's how you get emergent things to happen. But how do you get the NPCs to be able to communicate about it, to be able to tell the user and convey what's happened in a way that they can understand? Well, that's where the language model comes in, and it's extremely important. Both sides of the coin are extremely important.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, that's, I think, most of what we've been doing. I don't know if there's any kind of last questions from people about the platform before we jump into next step. Let's see.
When will content creators get access to this?
Yeah.
Tool?
So good question. So I'd say in the next like day or two, Nico's just kind of wrapping up a last couple of bugs, and then Drew's fixing one more bug that's been kind of small but annoying. And yeah, we'll kind of like soft give it to people. So if you just keep your eye on general, we'll kind of tell people, hey, you can go now. And then we'll start announcing it more broadly next week. But we figured, hey, if you guys want to mess around with it over the weekend and, break it and find more problems that we can fix, then we'll fix some of those bugs next week. And then
we're at the play test phase, so I mean, just ask if you want access, and we'll just probably give you access, and all we want is some feedback, right? Tell us what worked, what didn't, what do you want to do next with it, because that's going to help set up priorities for next milestones.
Exactly. Yeah. So we'll announce it in general. We're not going to add everybody. We'll just kind of low key let people know. And then if you want to access and like, hey man, I want to help with testing, or I want to mess around with the tool, just message us on general after that announcement, and like we can go through and give more people access. Like I said, I'm happy to give more people access if they really want to use it.
Q wants to see your art, Dan. You want to share something?
Yeah, I'm trying to see what I should show. We have a couple different things that's possible to show. We could show the very early progress of our character customization or character editor.
Let's do that. I'm gonna just to follow the agenda here, guys.
Mm-hmm.
So we've done the editor, that's coming. We've announced the secret release date, which is today or tomorrow. And now let's just quickly do a naming stuff, and then it's going to be all Dan and cool art stuff. So yeah, let me take my no more screen sharing, and I'm gonna do some. I guess got a couple slides. This will be really quick, guys. So yeah, we thanks everybody for filling out our the naming form, and so here were some of the results that we got. So the way we were thinking about this was, it's not like we've had thousands of, responses where we have a statistically significant result, but we just wanted to kind of get general direction from people and get, more importantly, not really the quantitative feedback, which this is the quantitative feedback, but also just get qualitative, people's opinions and thoughts. And, initially we were leaning a lot towards Synthos and calling them synth, but we had some really good feedback around it. Feels very artificial and cold. And the game that we're trying to build is really more about emotion and emotional, creating these really realistic and living things. And, synthetic actually probably goes against that. So, the name that we are the most excited about was, the original name, Incite. We're really trying to incite the best stories in gaming. It's, part of why we founded the company. And, on top of it, it performed better than anything else. Papaya came in second. Papaya is super fun, but it has literally no meaning. The origin story for Papaya is that Nico was using this staging setup called Netlify, and they just named it Papaya whatever.
Ooh,
and it was
free plug for Netlify. Give us some money, guys. Sponsored talk.
Yeah. And so I just Papaya started to grow in favor, and it's cute. It's fun to say, and calling the characters Poppy or Paya would be hilarious, but there's really no meaning behind it. And also there's just a million things called Papaya. There's in fact another AI product called Papaya. So we're let's let's not do that. And like I said, synth, I really like that, but again, it just kind of felt like maybe a little too high techy. And so we said, hey, let's do Incite. And so, Dan did some good work on logos and, was able to whip up something that looks, I think, super sharp. We'll still be in, like the company is still Incite. And then the product that we're building is Incite Worlds. It has a different kind of color. So it's, again, I just think it looks sharp, and, was able to whip it up super quick. So yeah, I think that's it. And so the next thing, from a naming perspective is just to work on, what do we want to call the agents? Agent is definitely, again, one of those things that feels too cold. So we have a lot of ideas. We already included them in the last survey. And so we're just kind of looking through it, discussing it, and also kind of like putting up some like branding, like put it on the website and see how we feel, like kind of mull it over and shoot over. So we'll get that done pretty soon. But that's not really blocking us from launching. So yeah, that's everything in branding world. So Dan, if you want to share your screen, we can, if you click on this share screen, then we can put it on stage and you can, share away.
Yeah. Give me 1 second. Unity is reloading for me right now. So my screen is stuck. So what I think would be cool to do is show some concept stuff coming in that we're playing with, and then show you like the current state of the character editor, which I got to remind you guys is totally work in progress with temporary assets, but it will give you a glimpse of what sort of things you can edit, and hopefully it will work. Let me see. Open up this and run. Okay. Let me share my screen. Window. No. Entire screen. Second screen. Okay. You guys see this?
Now we can.
So this is our prototype.
Wow. Nice art, Dan.
Did you not hear what I just said?
Hey, it looks just like it. What?
This is temp art. Even I think I could do better than that, man.
Yes,
Showing you dirty laundry, man.
It is absolutely temp art. But we are experimenting with like character customization systems are pretty complex, of like all the different properties you want to be able to let them edit. So we're letting you define different body types, be able to change different head shapes. But one of the more interesting things about this character system is the face customization, which we're opting to use basically 2D features, 2D face features on top of the 3D model, which lets us do a lot more expressive things. And yes, we have a nose. I know that the vampire one did not initially have a nose.
Yes.
But yeah, you can choose to.
Can you turn the nose off? I mean, is there an off option?
No. There should be. There's not yet, but there will be.
Should there be a no nose option? I don't know about that. Are we making like Voldemort characters with just 2 holes?
Yeah. But anyway, so because these features, these face features are 2D elements, it gives you a lot of freedom to like push them and do really crazy stuff. Some things like really weird stuff. And we're probably going to come up with some better constraints with it to make sure that you don't do things that look completely broken. But this also lets us do really expressive faces too. So it's really easy for us to come up with new eye shapes, new mouth shapes, and new eyebrow shapes. And then you can position and scale them wherever you want. And then we can also animate them pretty easily as well, just by doing traditional 2D animation where we flip book the eyes. So there's that. I
can't wait for the mouths to animate to match what they're saying. That's gonna be crazy. Yeah,
for sure. We've also been playing with like what the style of the thing should be. So here's a couple different takes on different character styles. We're playing with proportions. So this is like a taller, more slender take. And this is the same thing with our current proportions that we see in Vampire right now. And we're trying to figure out what are the best trade-offs for what our product currently is, and the perspective of the camera and all those different things.
Can you explain the pros and cons of like the chibi style versus the thinner style?
Yeah, there's all sorts of different considerations here, because the more realistic you make the proportions of a character, the more fidelity they want to have in general. So it increases just from a production standpoint. We have to keep in mind the costs and resources that we have available, and we have a lot more wiggle room if we keep characters more abstract, and to prevent us from falling into that uncanny valley trap. So that's one consideration. But there's also the consideration of the game itself and the perspective of the game. Sometimes when you use more realistic human proportions and you have like this top-down isometric view game like we currently have, well, then all the details kind of get lost. You kind of want to zoom in with the camera to be able to see all that detail, because they're just so small proportionally. So typically for like these top-down games, you want them to have a little bit more mass. You want them to have a little bit more chunk, so that the details that you do put on those characters can read much more instantaneously. So you capture the idea of what these characters are supposed to represent in a scene. It's like, oh, that's a queen, or that's a zombie, or that's a whatever. You should be able to understand that very quickly. But that also could change if we decide, you know what, maybe this isometric camera thing is not the way that we want to go. Maybe we do want to be more immersive and maybe even third person. Well, then that has a completely different set of needs, right? Suddenly all this chibi stuff, no longer serves the purpose of the product. And so this is the sort of exploration stuff we're doing right now.
Yeah, and just for some comments, I like the squatter format personally. And then we have I dislike the big heads. Yeah, Claude, we were actually talking about your feedback the other day about how also like, yeah, see, we've got a smaller head version, which this works better when you're seeing it front on. But to Dan's point earlier, when the camera's far up, and there's a lot of things going on, the bigger heads also, it makes it easier. So if like the character gets like happy and they smile, the bigger head just gives the emotion. It makes the emotion easier to read. Again, and I think it depends. It really, on our side, it's more about where the camera is going to be, and that will help dictate.
Just scale the head bone based on the camera angle.
Yeah, and honestly, that's totally within reason. Like that's a totally easy thing that we can do. So we're going to play with that bone, the head bone scale in the product.
Yeah.
Then there's a couple more things I can show. So we're also actively, we made the guard at the gate, we made the vampire scene, and we're also actively working on a couple more scenes internally to demonstrate different types of scenarios that we can do. So if you can see Discord here, this is one that our artist Nixa is working on, of a bar scene where your goal is to, pick up somebody at the bar and see if they'll like you. So we went for a dive bar. It's early concept, but you can see that not only are there people here, and we are aspiring to have more than just a one-on-one scenario like the vampire is, and have more characters. But there's also things to do. There's going to be interactive things in this room that could keep it interesting. So yeah, really excited to see where that goes to.
Okay, picking somebody up at a dive bar. That's the thing people do. Hey, it's practice, guys. If anybody single out there, you can get some practice reps in. And also, yeah.
I was just gonna say real quick. I don't know if we saw the comment from Knight Sidonia from YouTube. They mentioned that it seems like we're using the morph animation and package in one FBX model, which I don't know what that means, but Dan, I bet you do.
Yeah, so I'm not quite sure what he's meaning by that, but we are using morph targets or blend shapes is the other term for it, to be able to blend between different body types. And we might even have, we started with one blend shape that kind of blends you between your gender, whether you want a more feminine body or a more masculine body. We also have a blend shape for weight. And we're probably going to add a few more too. But yeah, I'm not sure what he means about
make you taller.
Yeah, and we can also scale the proportions of the character as well.
Cool. I feel like I had something art related, but oh yeah. To Dan's point of like the rooms that we're making. So as we mentioned, like for the release we're going to do tomorrow, that's just going to be still Madison's room, but you can change Madison and all the things in it in terms of like the backstory. But when we release phase 2, you're going to be able to, pick from a handful of rooms, and they're going to be more bare. Like this one's all filled. There's going to be like a bar with, like the walls and the floors. And then you're going to be able to then drop in your own tables and chairs and move them around. So that's what we'll be doing with the next one. Is we're not necessarily going to like, we'll make a few completed rooms for you to use, but also you'll be able to remove stuff and like say, okay, I want to like the office, and I'm going to put in like my own stuff in there. Okay, well, I think that's everything that was on the agenda. I know, Ryan, you wanted to talk more with Dan live, like kind of do a bit of an interview. Do you want to maybe jump into that, and then Nico and I can jump out?
Sure. Yeah. So I have written a few questions that I was curious to hear Dan's feedback, and I'm sure you guys may be interested as well. So Dan, I'm just going to jump right in. If that's
Sure.
okay with you.
Yeah, go for it.
All right.
You guys.
See ya. Thanks, Friday. So first question, how is Insight incorporating AI language models into the NPC behavior? And ultimately, how is it enhancing the ability to tell a story in the game?
Yeah, it's probably the most important question, right? A lot of people have really big opinions about AI, and we want to be careful, not like how we use it, not only because of the moral issues around it, but also just because we are most interested in producing a fun experience. That is by far the most important thing to us. And so I was mentioning this a little bit earlier, and I can elaborate a little bit deeper here, but language models alone are not the answer to making fun experiences, period. They're too expensive, they're too slow, and also they lack meaning. What do I mean by lack meaning? Well, if you give every decision, if you concede every decision to a language model, then you as a game designer don't have really control over what happens or what doesn't happen. You just are left to the whims of whatever a language model decides. And it also tends to be kind of like a yes and improvisation partner to you. So like there's a few experiments out there, people making these AI-based games. But at any point you could just say, and then I take out my sword of destiny and I swipe everyone down in a single blow. And then the language model will go, oh yes, of course. Yes, you did. Yes. Let's keep going with that. And that's what I mean by lacks meaning. Nothing is of consequence when you are merely using a language model. And so, it's our belief that that's not the whole thing. Like it's very important that we have a ground truth that's full of meaning, that gives you a lot of the game values, the gameplay values and game feel that we as game designers, we've all been in the industry for a very long time, know are very important to players. And does that mean that the language model is not important? No, it is super important. So this idea of what we've been building goes back almost a full decade. And we figured out pretty early on how to make these emergent things happen through the relationship graph that we showcased earlier. But the one unknown problem, or the unknown question, was how do you convey this information to a user? Now, traditionally, conveying this sort of stuff to a user involves tons of UI and stats and numbers, and you're basically playing a spreadsheet game. Dwarf Fortress comes to mind, or RimWorld or whatever. It's very complicated games that is not very accessible to the broader demographic of what we would like to reach. It would be great if the AIs can just communicate with you, if you can have a dialogue. It's like, why did you open that door? Oh, I opened it because of X, Y, and Z. Now that is super powerful to me. So we have this really robust simulation that's emergent, that's based on ground truth and real things and relationships. And then being able to interpret that world with a language model to be able to convey information in and out to the player.
Okay, so I'm going to ask a follow-up question to that then. Like, when it seems like there's so much power in the systems and the engine that you're building, what unique challenges come up when trying to, I guess, squeeze that into a UI profile that like a gamer can use, right? Like what complexities arise?
Where to draw the line between that simulation and the language model, it can be fuzzy or it can be difficult. So one of the downsides of using a classical simulation to drive everything is that you need a feature for everything that you want to support. So the vampire is a really good example of this, where we started off saying with a purely classical mechanic. We said we want to make a game where the premise is you have to convince the vampire. And how do you convince the vampire? Well, let's do it classically. We need to define what it means to convince a vampire. And the way that we decided to do it was, well, if you talk positively about the things that the vampire cares about. So she cares about streaming, she cares about games, and she cares about a number of things. She's very vain. And if you can talk positively about those things, then you can build a relationship with her. And the goal was, if you build enough of a relationship with her, she'll let you leave. Very mechanical, based in ground truth. But the problem is when we went to actually play test it, almost nobody was playing it in that way. Nobody thought to go investigate her backstory and then leverage that to build a relationship with her. Almost universally, the thing that most people did was immediately try to trick her, try to lie to her, or try to come up with like some silly premise. I have garlic in my pocket or whatever. And that's what the fun was that people wanted to have. So yeah, we made a game that had a mechanic, a classical mechanic that was based on one way to convince the vampire, but it was only one way. There could be a whole variety of ways to convince somebody to do something, and we would have had to build a new feature for every single one of those things to have full coverage of the possibilities. So in this case, we had to move the line a little bit, and this is where we started to investigate more into what I earlier mentioned as language gates, which I think is an extremely powerful concept. This idea that you can not relinquish control to the language model to make decisions, but instead you leverage the language model to make an assessment about the state of the world. And then you, as a game designer, can still have control over what you decide to do with that assessment. That is a super powerful thing. Now, suddenly, as soon as we added that, and it was a very quick thing, we kind of redid what we had built for the existing convince mechanic and then made it more broad or more general purpose. Instantaneously, we had an infinite possible number of ways to convince the vampire to let you leave. So that's the biggest challenge, is where do you draw that line? Because there's trade-offs, right? Because the more that you lean on the language model, it comes with all of those downsides that I mentioned earlier of cost and performance and meaning. And so we have to be very, very careful about how we approach that.
I really like your point there, because I feel like a lot of the AI experiences that are out there right now, they do feel super rigid. Like you could tell that you're interacting with a language model, right? But that's not how it is in the real world. Like you can't walk up to me and say, "Hey, give me your hat," and I just hand it to you. Like there's a more gray zone. And I feel like with what you guys have built with Madison, like that gray zone's kind of coming to life a little bit. It's really cool.
Yep, for sure.
Okay, so I guess a follow-up question onto that. So, you have this super powerful AI that players can use to build their own games, share those games. What challenges or opportunities are there when you think about immersion and making sure like it feels natural and comfortable and easy to use and all those things for players?
Yeah, I think if I understand the question correctly, I mean, well, actually, can you rephrase the question just one more time for me before I answer?
Yeah. So, I guess with our system, it feels like you could do so much. We're giving so much power to a player to create a game, but providing that in a way where the UI is immediately easy to use. Like I don't need to be educated on it. I don't need to have someone sit beside me and walk me through it.
Got it.
Yeah, can you elaborate on
Yeah,
that?
yeah. I mean, I think that's another like super exciting thing to me. You know, our founding team all comes from UGC. Nico is one of the earliest employees at Roblox. I just came from Manticore. Andrew also did a previous startup doing UGC, and pretty much every single UGC platform right now is really asking players or creators, I guess, is the term that we tend to use, to be full game developers. Like there's actually very little difference between what a creator and on these platforms do versus what true game developers do. You're still being asked to produce art assets and code assets and have good game design sense and so on. And we've often learned that it's asking too much of creators to be able to do those things well, because you end up with these experiences where it's like, okay, you have a platform full of these UGC experiences that people have made that are reminiscent of other games. Like maybe it's like, oh, you can play a Fortnite-like sort of experience or something like that. But the question becomes, why would you play it on that platform and not the better version, of which there's plenty of free, really awesome options available, Fortnite being included in that list, right? So with what we're building, it's exciting to me because it's a new kind of UGC experience. It's not only a new way to play, it's a new way of creating. The primitives are entirely different. We're not asking people to know how to code or how to produce art assets. Instead, we're asking people to define interesting premise. You know, everybody understands social mechanics. It's how we live day in, day out. We understand what upsets people. We understand personality quirks. And those are the primitives in which you're constructing these scenes. You're defining backstories and relationships and motivations. And then we take care of the hard part about turning those descriptions of things into really cool emergent scenarios. So our goal is to make that as easy as possible. There will be, you know, fun level editing tools, which is a solved problem. It's not, you know, that's not going to be the difficult part. You know, character customization tools, and then the ability to define these social narrative primitives that I discussed earlier.
Awesome. And another question I had for you is, like, you and the team are really on the cutting edge when it comes to emergent technology within gaming. Curious, just on your personal perspective, like, how do you think AI will ultimately change gaming in the future?
I think it has the potential to reach a whole new audience. And that's extremely exciting to me. So just like mobile gaming opened up, you know, people who had never touched a game before in their life. Now, like the vast majority of the world seems to be a gamer. It's just they wouldn't call themselves a gamer. You know, like my parents play mobile games, yet they would have never played a game otherwise. I think there's going to be a similar shift due to AI, because what it's allowing us to do is have a new type of gameplay that is hyper accessible, because you play it the same way that, like, you already know how to play it. If you know how to talk to another human being and interact with them, you already know how to play this game. It's not about how you hold a controller and how fast you can mash the buttons. It's about how clever and witty you can be. And that is really interesting proposition to me. And it has not only like in terms of usability, but also in terms of interest. There's a story for everyone out there. There's a story for my daughter. There's a story for my mom. There's a story for me. There's not really a situation where people's like, oh, I just don't like stories, right? Everybody falls in love with this idea that they want to live in further. They watch a movie or something that they fall in love with. It's like, oh, what would I do in that sort of situation? And we get to allow them to explore that possibility in an interactive fiction, which is just awesome.
You know, I've never really thought about that element before, but the accessibility to games is going to be revolutionized. You know, if you can hold a conversation, you can play these games and have fun.
Yeah, 100%. We're often asked by VCs, you know, when we go do our pitches and stuff like that, it's like, what is the market? How many people can you possibly reach with this sort of thing? And it's just a silly question to me, not because it's not a good question, but because it's so obvious and astronomical that to pose the question, it kind of takes me back. It's like we are on the precipice of a completely new generation of games and gamers because of this.
All right. So Dan, my last question for you is what personally motivated you to explore kind of this intersection of AI and gaming?
Yeah. So I already mentioned this idea goes back almost a decade. I remember, so I was still at Zynga, and I was having lunch in the atrium with Nico. We were both there at Zynga. In fact, all three of us were collided at Zynga, and we were talking about this idea. And the reason why I've been thinking about this for so long is because I've always had a love-hate relationship with games, but particularly games with story in it. Because I want to have games that have story and meaning, but I always found myself frustrated with it when I'd play a game and, I'd be doing all this stuff. I'd be empowered to be the person that I'm controlling. I am in the game. And then it all pauses. It's like, okay, hold on, stop. We're going to tell you a little bit of this story that we want to tell you. We're even going to take over your character for a little bit, and then you can play the game again. Right? It seems such a jarring disposition against what gameplay is even supposed to be, that it felt like water and oil to me always. Now, I'm not saying that people don't enjoy that. Some people love that sort of thing. But it was never great for me. I want the gameplay to be the story. I want to drive where that narrative takes me. And that's why I tend to lean towards games that allow that in some way. Like I think back to the Myst series. People don't typically think of it as a narrative heavy game, but there is narrative there, and it's all baked into the environment and storytelling of the world. And it's never done in a way where they take away my agency. And that's the most important thing. If you can tell a story without taking away the player's agency, you win. Now, Myst and Riven and all of the subsequent games, or any sort of point and click adventure games like those, they had to do it in a very constrained way. But now we have the opportunity to do this in a very empowering way, where you can change the story based on your interactions. So that's what drove me to think about this. And that's where we came up with the seeds of this idea. At the time, Gen AI and language models were not a huge thing. That came later. Only just a couple of years ago did that become a big thing on top of people's minds. And it became very clear to us, recounting the ideas and the conversations we had at Zynga. It's like, wait a second, this is the solution. This is the other piece of the puzzle that allows you to have these sort of emergent experiences, but in a way that's super accessible. And so here we are.
You're so while you were describing your prior gaming experiences, it made me think of like those amusement park rides that you get on that are on rails, but like maybe they go through a tunnel and there's some ghosts or whatever, and it's like storytelling but on rails. Whereas at Insight, it's almost fair enough to say like the player is building their own amusement park and then jumping in the ride to see how it plays
100%.
out.
Yeah, 100%. And it even, makes you reconsider, what does it mean to have a good story in general? What is a good story, period? Because like you would be quick to assume that a good story is one that has been crafted by a great author. And that is true. I think that's one version of a good story. But I also think that a really good story is one that has meaning, where the reason why it's good is because it's a consequence of your actions. If something happens in a game and you had no part in why that happened, then it doesn't feel good to you. Like, why should you care? Right. So, it doesn't necessarily need to have these traditionally, good narrative values for it to be a good interactive story for you. All it has to really do is have good meaning and have good motivation behind those meanings.
With a world that at times makes you feel further and further away from meaning, I think this is really timely and inspirational. Dan, you made it through my my litany of questions. Thank you.
Well, cool.
Appreciate it.
No, I appreciate the questions. Thanks.
Community, before we wrap this thing up, any last comments, questions, concerns? And by the way, no, my voice is not naturally this deep. I have a slight cold, so appreciate you suffering through it.
Yeah, thanks Ryan for being a trooper through your sickness for this.
Yeah. All right.
All right.
We left
Thanks,
it
guys.
speechless. Thanks, Dan.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Take it easy. Peace. Wait for it. I got to end it first. Let's see. Do I just... Oh, there it is. I found the button. I got it. See ya.